Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
Bo Parrish, the thing I like about the word discipline today is the fact that grammatically it can be considered a noun and a verb, and really is the foundation of transitioning desire into talent. Can you expand on the definition of discipline in your eyes?
Absolutely. Well, Dave, first of all, I want to give credit right back to you. Just in our previous conversation, you just completed a 5-hour bike ride when your training schedule called for a 4-hour bike ride. Now, you ran into some flats around 60 miles, which you really had no other choice but to address the issue at hand, particularly if you wanted to get home on time and not be in trouble with Melissa. But nonetheless, you took 20 minutes and probably $25 to repair the tire. You did what was necessary to complete the ride. Now, that is a byproduct of discipline that has been built in you over the years as you have pursued your passion of Ironman racing. And I think that's a perfect lead in to our topic today. And, you know, it's funny how we tend to associate negative feelings, emotions with just the word discipline. You know, I talk to folks regularly, and you and I have both discussed and are well aware of my purpose in life is just to help others see change as a blessing and not a burden, as an opportunity and not an obstacle. Because if you think about the universal concept of change, it implies doing something differently than what you're doing now. Now, whatever it is you're doing now, you developed some type of routine along the way. And for whatever reason it is, you've continued in that path. And whether you're passionate about it or just content to get by, it's become a habit. So as you mentioned, discipline being the foundation for desire eventually becoming a talent, desire is fantastic. We were all born with it. There are all certain versions of ourselves that we aspire to be. But in order to bridge that gap between where we are now, which I would simply call our potential, to where we want to be, which is going to be living out our purpose with passion, there's a gap there. And that gap is called discipline. Now, the most important step is the first step, is actually making a move towards your purpose. And how will you ever know if you do not have the discipline to repeat the process? Doing it once, anybody can do. Doing it twice, well, that cuts down the category. Doing it over and over and over again, well, that's when you start to build the discipline that is the noun. But in the meantime, disciplining yourself is a way that you can ensure that your desire will eventually translate into talent. You know, I always like to say, one of my very good friends said it best when he said, Bo, whenever you begin anything new, your desire will always outpace your talent. But at some point, if you stick with it long enough, your talent is going to catch up. But don't ever let your talent get so far ahead of your desire that it becomes stale, that it becomes monotonous, that it becomes essentially routine. Our number one focus in life is to find our purpose. And once we've found it through the disciplines that we've created, whether it be activities that are repeated, both in a good sense and in a sense that's always not so fun, like waking up before the sun comes up and jumping in the pool to start a long swim, or even getting our bike when it's raining. I mean, I've got a race in Chattanooga on Sunday, and the forecast is 100% rain and 100% humidity. It's going to be a sauna. But because of my passion and the discipline, meaning the activities and our mutual affinity for triathlon, swim, bike, and run over the last 10 years, I'm going to do it and I'm going to do well, not because I'm arrogant, because I'm cocky, but because my actions over this cumulative amount of time had given me the confidence that regardless of the conditions, which are the same, and we talked about this 3 weeks ago after the Boston Marathon. I mean, those weather conditions were horrific, but everyone in that race had disciplined themselves over the last 6 months to a year and to prepare and to race for whatever the weather threw them. So discipline is about controlling the things that we can control and not worrying about those that we can't, because we all know as human beings, every single day when we wake up, we have two lists. We have the controllables, we have the uncontrollables. And in my experience, the uncontrollables is always significantly longer than those that we can control. So we control what we can in the form of discipline, and we trust that the rest will eventually work itself out.
I hope this applies to this conversation, but I've heard this phrase, and I've heard it in basketball, for example, that talent beats hard work, but hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So it's the discipline of working hard, even if you don't have the talent. But once you get that talent, like you talked about, then you have to maintain that hard work. And that's where that discipline comes into play. Continue to be disciplined at working hard to maintain your talent and to beat those who aren't working hard, who may or may not have talent.
Absolutely. I mean, what an incredible statement. And just to stay on your basketball analogy, the world now knows Michael Jordan as the best basketball player to ever live, although I know some would contend that LeBron James is in that category. But what the world doesn't know is that Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. What the world doesn't know is that Michael Jordan practices free throws more than anyone in the history of North Carolina basketball. And what we also didn't know, and I learned this last Friday when I heard Coach K speak at a conference in Chicago, is that during his 12-year stint as the U.S. men's Olympic basketball coach, Michael Jordan referred to him as sir, and in any amount of downtime the team had, wherever they were in the world, Michael Jordan wanted, desired, demanded the coaching of Coach K, who is now one of the most successful basketball coaches to ever live. That type of talent doesn't happen on accident. It is as a result of an astronomical amount of desire that was born in Michael Jordan from a very little boy, but obviously was developed through a discipline that so very many people possess. And the results speak for themselves.
Now, you said early on that there is sometimes a negative connotation associated with the word discipline. It all depends on where it's coming from, but I think it's our perspective on what that discipline will get us in the long run, because someone may think so-and-so is being hard on me, whether it's my boss, my parents, my coach, something like that. They're being really hard on me, but there is a purpose to this discipline because there is a long-term goal. Can you expand on that?
No question. And Dave, thank you for the opportunity to circle back to this particular aspect of our D word, that being discipline. So let's revisit this concept of change, because as human beings, there has never been a perfect person to walk the face of the earth. So imperfection implies a series of starts and finishes with failures scattered in between. We are always seeking to become better versions of ourselves, which inevitably involves starting over. So as we seek to pursue, to find, to recreate our passion for the purpose of giving it away so that others in too can find their passion, which I just so happen to believe is the epitome of encouragement, that which involves giving courage to others, is that in the process, change is inevitable. So let's revisit the negative, if there is such a thing as a negative aspect of the discipline, and that would come when the first time we attempt to change, whatever it may be, whether it be a sport, whether it be a career, whether it be a relationship, The fact that we needed more than one attempt implies that there was failure the first go around. So I was listening to one of my favorite pastors the week before last communicate this concept of, in general, starting over, in that we also tend to associate negative connotations with failure. Whereas failure is absolutely fine as long as we don't stop. Or as he put it, failure is fine as long as it's not final. So attempt one doesn't necessarily work out. Well, we always say, and we've heard it passed down from generation to generation, is experience is the best teacher. There's no substitute for it. Well, the argument that this pastor presented, which I happen to love, is experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. So, considering the fact that experience is in play would mean that something has happened in our past that didn't necessarily go according to plan. So, in order to make peace with our past and to truly learn from the negative experience, it is incumbent upon us, and I'm going to say this very slowly, in order to make peace with our past, we must own our piece of the past. Translation: whatever it is that went wrong in our first attempt, we own up to it. We accept it. We don't pass it off. We don't blame. We don't inevitably assume that just because it happened once, we learn from it, and that intuitively we know not to repeat the same mistake over and over and over again. So we evaluate our experience, Dave. And by evaluating it, we by default take ownership of it. We understand what went wrong. And so now we have a track record. And what I always love to share with people is just to keep a journal, because what gets written gets remembered. If we have no perspective from what happened in our past, how in the world can we help but repeat history? Because we all know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So what happens between the first go around and the second go around and the third go around? And the good Lord knows, I know this better because I'm the world's biggest knucklehead, is that what happens in between our do-overs is we develop discipline, because we take ownership of our past mistakes and we take corrective measures going forward. This is the way that we learn. We learn from our past mistakes. We own them. We work through the failure by getting up the next day and repeating a new and improved version based on what we learned the first go around. So, in order to make peace with our past, we must own our piece of the past. Does that make sense?
It does. And that evaluation aspect that you mentioned reminds me of our previous talk when you have someone who is, and I can't remember who they are, but you had three mentors or adult figures in your life that you would bounce ideas off of. And I forget the term that you used for them. What are they?
My personal board of directors.
Them. Is that this whole evaluation, reflection upon what you've done and the mistakes you've made can be doubled when you share those mistakes or share those experiences with someone else, and they can bring a new perspective and help you see another type of evaluation.
Without a doubt. And that is one of the most amazing benefits of accountability, is that now you have others that you are aware of that have authority to speak into your life. You're not living your life in the company of one. You're in the presence of others who ideally are older, more experienced, and have the perspective of evaluated experience so that they too can share. I mean, Dave, you and I both know there's no such thing as original knowledge. It's just how willing are we to listen and to adapt based on those that have gone before us. That's how we truly become productive members of our society, and how in turn we have the ability to turn around and pour into others. We have a responsibility as men, as leaders, as athletes, to take what we've learned, that which has been shared, and then in turn pass it on to the next who show that desire. And then provide encouragement as they struggle, as they inevitably will, with doing something different. Dave Ramsey, who's here locally in Nashville, is very famous for one of his quotes related to change. And you've heard me say this before, but just to reiterate for our audience, Dave Ramsey says, you will never do anything differently in life until your pain of same exceeds your pain of change.
I love that. This discipline, are there small examples that people can take, or small steps, I should say, that people can take right now? And one thing that comes to mind is, what is written is remembered. Is it a journal that someone can do to remind them of their small mistakes, something that they've done throughout the day, going, here's what I attempted to do today, here was on my list, didn't quite accomplish it, and then I can go back and look at it again? Is a journal one step in this discipline process that someone could incorporate in their life?
Great question. And let me go a little bit deeper on the journaling concept. Is that I would first answer the question by encouraging our audience to start by identifying their desire. And it sounds a little cheesy, yes, but it is important that we identify where we're going, because if we don't know where we're going, we'll essentially never get there. So we write our desire down, and then we associate a certain list of tasks that are going to be required to eventually turn that desire into discipline. And then we take note of those, and we consciously pursue those with the expectation that they will lead to passion, which will ultimately lead us to our purpose. But Dave, along the way, there are going to be setbacks. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be adversity. We know that. We live in an imperfect world. And so on the flip side of that journaling activity is I would also encourage everyone to keep what's called a done list. So we have a to-do and a done. And done can be tracked simply with your outbox in your email, or your outgoing call log, or the text messages you send, so you can keep track of your activity, because motion tends to lead to momentum. And if we can measure the results we've taken, doesn't mean they necessarily have to lead to anything. But again, we're talking discipline, which in the early stages lends itself to repeated behavior that is ultimately going to produce in us the talent that we are seeking from our original desire.
This is so incredible. I mean, we talked about commitment in one of our previous talks, and I think commitment and discipline are, they're intertwined. I mean, one can't live without the other one. They're linked because both are the foundation. You need to have a commitment, and for that commitment to continue on, you have to have discipline to follow through on that commitment. And I really like this whole noun verb turning something that's on a piece of paper into an action. I'm just really excited to hear this. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, well, Dave, no question. And as we said last week, commitment literally defined is doing the thing we said we were going to do long after the feeling we made it in has passed. Today, we're talking about the literal action of the original commitment. Doing what we said we were going to do, is the discipline that is eventually going to lead us to our purpose.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.